Do we want Ha-Seong Kim back with the Braves because he's a really good shortstop or because there are no other options? We'll look at the pros and cons of Kim returning on this episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, and leave me a comment down below. You had plenty of comments on yesterday's episode. I'll address some of those later on in today's podcast. But thank you so much for that support. And on the audio side, you can help out as well. Just leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. On today's episode, we're going to continue the theme that we started yesterday, looking at the shortstop position and discussing the pros and cons of Ha-Seong Kim returning. Do we want him back just simply because there's no better options out there, or is he actually a really good option? And we should be wanting him to come back and be a huge contributor for this team. Would Alex Anthopoulos consider that the big bat to add this offseason? We'll get into all of that on today's episode, which is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, as I said, we discussed yesterday the idea of, or not really the idea, just the decision of Alex Anthopoulos not to aggressively pursue Dansby Swanson and not overpay him, which again, I agree with, but my main gripe was the fact that you didn't have a backup plan for that. And here we are 3 years later, and you're in a situation where you're really hoping that Ha-Seong Kim either picks up his player option for $16 million for 2026, or you're able to work a, relatively team-friendly deal, because that's the only type of free agent deals that Alex Anthopoulos is going to sign. And it's put yourself in a really, uncomfortable position at shortstop. So I wanted to look at this episode and break it down with pros and cons of Ha-Seong Kim, because I'm very much on the train that I want Ha-Seong Kim back. I want him as an Atlanta Brave, but I'm trying to decipher as I go through this, is that more because of, I think he's a really good shortstop and a really good fit for this team, or just because of the lack of options out there? Not even just good options, but options in general. Which one is driving more of that feeling of wanting Ha-Seong Kim to come back? So I'm going to start with the cons, because I like my bad news first. And one of the biggest cons for me with Ha-Seong Kim are the injuries and the age. And I got to be careful talking about people getting old when they're getting into their 30s, because your boy's pushing 40 here. So he's about to turn 30, though, and he's coming off an injury-riddled season in which he played in just 48 games. And injuries have been a problem for Kim throughout his career, especially since he came over from Korea to Major League Baseball in 2021. He's played in 117 games, 150, 152, but then 121, and this past year, 48. So in only 2 of 5 seasons has he played more than 121 games. That's a bit of a concern and a bit of a red flag. And when you look at the injuries that he's had since coming over, it's finger, thumb, leg, hamstring, shoulder, abdominal, triceps, shoulder, calf, foot. And then this past year hurt his back 3 separate times. That's alarming. I mean, from head to toe, he has hurt pretty much everything since coming over. And the reason he didn't sign a big deal last offseason is because he went into the offseason needing shoulder surgery, having shoulder surgery to repair a small tear in his right shoulder's labrum, which I think has a big effect on his defense. And that's the next con for me. And this one is a bit of an unknown. I get that. It could be a positive. It's been a positive in the past. He's been a great defensive player analytically at both second base and shortstop in his big league career. But in 2025, he had a negative defensive rating, according to FanGraphs. He had -3 outs above average. He had -1 fielding run value. And it was the first time that he ever had negative defensive run saves. It was clearly his worst defensive season yet. The question is, was that a product of the injuries, or is that a product of the injuries and decline? And can he get back to the pre-injury form defensively? He won a Gold Glove in 2023, but that year he mostly played second base, and he's been good to great in the past. But like I said, is there cause for concern that with all these injuries mounting up, with him going into his 30s, are his best defensive years behind him? I want to believe that it was mainly due to the injuries this year, but I don't know that. And that's something we can't really say for certain at the moment. All we can go off of is what we saw with our own eyes when he was with the Braves. And what we saw was okay. It wasn't great. There certainly were some plays that I wish he could have made that would have been spectacular plays, but those are the plays that good, above average major league fielders make. There were still some good plays in there, but I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw from him defensively. So that's all I really have to judge him on right now. And it wasn't great. And I think what concerns me the most out of all of this is he's coming off the shoulder injury, which is probably directly correlated to the lack of arm strength. In 2025, his average throw from shortstop was 83.7 miles per hour with a max of 87.1. Not awful by any means. It was less than Nick Allen, who had 84.6 and 89 was his max velocity from shortstop. But that number for Kim, it is way down from where it was before the shoulder injury, where those numbers were 88 mile per hour average, 92 mile per hour max, which was one of the tops in the league, top 10 in all of baseball at the shortstop position. Like I said, it's far from the worst. What we saw this past year was far from the worst. Dansby actually has one of the weakest arms in all of baseball, 79.6 mile per hour average, 84.1 mile per hour max. But Dansby makes up for it with 1,000 IQ, baseball IQ, great instincts, quick hands, all of that. Some of the same things that we saw from Nick Allen. And the reason why he was such a good defender because of those instincts, those quick hands, and all of that. But a big part of Ha-Seong Kim's game before the shoulder injury was, a strong arm from the shortstop spot. And if that arm strength does not come back, does that? I think it definitely does. We saw it this year. I think that certainly hurts his defensive value. And the other thing too, I have a couple more. It's not like he's a great offensive player. It's much better than what the Braves have been getting at shortstop. That's for sure. But he has a career WRC plus of 99. 100 is average. So he has pretty much been an average hitter since joining the league. Even in his best offensive season in 2023, he had a 110 WRC plus, and we all know that the balls were juiced in 2023. He had 17 home runs, career high. We all know the balls were juiced in 2023. Again, you're banking on him getting back to being a very good defender and an average hitter at 30 with all the injuries he had. That's wishful thinking. And that's the only reason that he's somewhat even available to the Braves. And again, I'm not saying that I don't want him. I started this off at the top saying I do want him, but I think we have to be honest with ourselves. It's not like you're getting a top of the market shortstop here, but you are potentially getting something far better than what you've been getting at that position. But that kind of leads me into my final, I got one more point on that, and then I'll get into my final con here. It seems a bit risky with everything that I just laid out. Seems a bit risky for what you might have to pay if he goes to free agency. If he picks up the $16 million player option, all good and well. If he doesn't and goes to free agency, Braves have already said we really want him. Okay, you're going to have to pay up. Are you going to have to pay $20 million a year for all of those cons that I just mentioned? I don't feel nearly as comfortable doing that. Are you going to have to give him 4 or 5 years at $20 million a year, maybe 20 plus? Who knows where this free agency market is going to go with Kim being, one of the very few shortstop options out there. And again, that's assuming most people don't consider Bo Bichette a shortstop long-term. He's still going to get paid good money, and he's probably still going to at least play shortstop for a little bit. But pushing Bo Bichette aside, there's really not anything else out there, especially on the free agent market. And I don't even know where there's anything on the trade market unless you're getting maybe some unproven shortstops who are blocked, and there's not really a lot of those out there. So that's one of the other cons along with that is that if he goes to free agency, you're going to have to pay market value for somebody that I just mentioned. He's at his best been an average offensive player, and the defense took a big slide last year. That could have been due to injuries, but we just don't really know. And the other thing is that it can't be the only bat. I'm afraid that AA would consider bringing back Ha-Seong Kim as the big bat of the offseason. And while it would be, again, an upgrade over what you've been getting at that position offensively, I'll be a little upset if we go through the offseason and they get Kim, and Kim is pitched as the big upgrade offensively. Because for me, that can't be the case. It can't just be Kim. And you're really just getting with Kim getting a serviceable shortstop, something that he's failed to do since you let Dansby get away, or Dansby got overpaid, whatever you want to call it. If Kim is kept, he can't be the only bat that is added this offseason. And I'm really worried that that's how AA is going to spin it, whether publicly or in his mind. He's going to spin it as Kim was the big offseason addition to help the lineup. And as I just pointed out, that's not really the case. At best, you're getting an average hitter. Next, we'll get into some of the pros. I know there's a lot of cons there. Started out with that, but I wanted to paint a clear picture, because I think we're all kind of caught up in, we need Ha-Seong Kim. We got to have him. We got to have him. And yes, we do, but I don't want people to get the impression or the idea that he's the going to come in and be this big offensive addition for this team. But let me know what your thoughts are on that. Like I said, next I'll get into the pros, because there are some pros. Like I said, I do want Ha-Seong Kim, but I think more of that reasoning is just because there's not any other options out there, and certainly doesn't seem to be many better options out there. But we'll get into those pros here next. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401k properties, investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Me and my wife, we just put the budget together for October, and so we are trying our best to stay onto that. But I got to watch these postseason, so I had to get yet another subscription so that I could watch these postseason. Monarch Money, they'll let me know when it's time to cancel that. But we loved using it. It's been great so that we can stay on the same page financially, and it'll help you as well. As William Contreras just hits a home run here. But you want to check out Monarch Money, you can do so and use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. So they can help keep you up with all these subscriptions, watching these fun postseason and baseball games like I am. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. They'll be getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball, the postseason action, the Phillies falling apart, losing to the Dodgers, this Brewers-Cubs game that's wild right now. You can check all that out on Locked On MLB with Sully and the guys from MLB Game Night. We'll have more coming your way this week. We'll get back into the manager search as well, giving you some of my top candidates right now. Hopefully we'll get some news and rumors on that soon, although we don't get a lot from the Braves front office on that. But we'll have more of that coming your way this week, as well as our mailbag episode on Friday. But let's get into the pros of Kim staying. It's a big upgrade, and I mean that. It is a big upgrade from what the Braves have had at the shortstop position for the past 3 years. The Braves rank, and I mentioned this on the podcast yesterday, the Braves rank 27th in F4 at the shortstop position since Dansby Swanson left. It's been an absolute mess at that position because you let Dansby walk, which again, he got overpaid, I get it, but you didn't have a backup plan. Your backup plan was Orlando Arcia and Vaughn Grissom, and Arcia had a fun first half to 2023, but then when reality hit, it has been an absolute disaster at that position since then. It was cool to watch Nick Allen and his defense in 2025, but he was he was the worst qualified hitter in all of baseball. The Braves have failed to come close to replacing even the level of Dansby Swanson, who, as I said yesterday, is a middling, mid-tier shortstop. And they haven't even come close to replacing that level of value. And I get the comments because I saw them. Again, I'm going to get to some of those comments later if we have time. I get the comments about how the rest of the lineup was doing their job. We wouldn't care too much about Orlando Arcia and Nick Allen not hitting. I have said that myself, but clearly what we've seen in the last 3 years is that's not true, that you can't have just black holes at the bottom of your lineup. And that's what it has been for most of the last 3 years. From the second half of 2023 on, you have had somebody at the bottom of your order that was not a legitimate threat at all. And it hasn't worked for the Atlanta Braves because a lot of those other guys haven't stepped up. But it's still not great to just have one of the worst qualified hitters in baseball. I think I mentioned on yesterday's episode, Orlando Arcia was the second worst qualified shortstop since 2023. You can't have one of the worst qualified players at that position in your lineup. And at some point, that's going to come back and hurt you. The other pro for me is that Kim fits the profile I think the Braves are trying to move towards. It is less power, but in his 3 good seasons, it's a strikeout rate under 20%. The last 4 years is a walk rate of at least 8%, with 2 years at 12%. His 2 years where he was healthy all year, it's kind of an Ozzie Albies thing. The years that he stays healthy all season are the years that he puts up really good numbers. And his 2 good years, we've seen him be around a 110 WRC plus guy, 12% walk rate, 16, 70% strikeout rate. He seems like a guy who will be more contact oriented and put the ball in play. And I think the Braves need some more guys like that. And look, I didn't really say this in the first segment of this, but the point I was also trying to make with the fact that this can't be your big bat addition is because if all things are going well and other guys are doing their job, Ha-Seong Kim's batting down in the order. He's batting 7th, 8th, and 9th. And that's really where you want him. But it's somebody who's batting 7th, 8th, and 9th that isn't just a pitcher spot. I mean, what you were getting out of Nick Allen was worse than what you would get out of Max Fried. I mean, you're at least getting a legitimate hitter in that spot in the lineup. The other pro for me is the speed element. We didn't see much of that this year, but again, the injuries, the back issues, all of that. But he's had 2 seasons of over 30 steals, and that's something the Braves have been lacking in order to find other ways to score. Like I said, if he's batting at the bottom of the order, he's getting on base with an 8-10% walk rate, hitting 250, 260, and he can steal 20 to 30 bases for you. That's going to be very valuable for this Atlanta Braves team at the bottom of the order. The other thing is team chemistry. He seemed to get along with most of the guys there, if not all of them, but especially with Profar, them having experience together in San Diego, and with Ozzie. But who doesn't get along with Ozzie? But I felt like bringing him in and getting that feel for him, he seemed like a great fit in the clubhouse, and heard nothing but good things about him. And I think there definitely are some pros, but as I just laid it out there, and you let me know what you think in the comment section below, I think this is definitely a situation where we're wanting something because of the necessity and because of the lack of other options. And it's not that Ha-Seong Kim is some great top tier shortstop. In his best years, he's a 750 OPS guy. He has played better defense. And if that comes back, then I'm feeling much better about it. I just don't know. If I knew the arm strength was going to come back, if I knew he was going to be a positive defender going forward, I'd feel much better about it. But I still think this is probably more of there's nothing else out there. We've got to have this. And it's way better than what you've been getting the last 3 years. So the player option decision for Ha-Seong Kim, it's 5 days after the World Series ends. So November 3rd at the earliest, November 6th at the latest is when we'll know for certain on Ha-Seong Kim. Obviously, they could work out a deal before then, but Scott Boras, so doubt it. But let me know what you think too. Do you think he's going to pick up that option? Do you think he's going to decline it? Do you think if he declines it, the Braves have any chance of getting him in free agency? What do you think he goes for in free agency? We did that episode during the season 2. You want to go back and give that a listen. I think somewhere in that 4-year, $75 million range, I think makes a lot of sense. And I'd be okay with that just because, as I said on yesterday's episode, you have no other options. You don't have anybody internally that is anywhere really even close to taking over at the shortstop position unless you think it is Nacho. But I don't. And I don't think the Braves do either. He completely came off that position this year. Even when there were opportunities to put him there, they didn't. So there is nothing remotely close internally, and I don't see much externally either. So I'm okay with giving Ha-Seong Kim that money. But again, it's more out of a lack of better options than anything else, than actually Ha-Seong Kim being, this great top tier shortstop. I think at best he's a middling shortstop. I think at best he's Dansby Swanson. But as I said yesterday, I would love to have Dansby Swanson over the last 3 years. I think it would have done wonders for this team, but not the case. Next, I do want to get back into that Dansby Swanson conversation because we had some interesting comments. Had a lot of comments, some colorful comments, and honestly, some people that I just don't think listened very closely to what I was saying on that episode. We'll get into that next and also talk about the latest from the postseason, all that here next. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live, the energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person, but actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees, it takes all the fun out of it. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets. Easy, delivered on time and at the best price, plus all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I used it the other day, take my nephew to a college football game. Super simple, super easy. Got tickets last minute, great deals, low price. Absolutely there on Gametime. The final Braves game that I went to this year, the final month, it was a disaster of a game to go to as the Braves got blown out, but we got great seats down in section 41 at a very low price. So me and the family had a fantastic time thanks to Gametime. And you can too. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. I want to revisit the conversation from yesterday on Dansby because had a lot of comments. Video did really well. And I think it was a lot of them were, good conversations, but I had some comments in there that made me really worry that I didn't get the point across that I was trying to get across. And maybe that's on me. Never once have I ever said that the Braves should pay Dansby Swanson $177 million. Never once have I ever said that. And I got a lot of comments like he was overpaid. I wouldn't do that. I'm glad the Braves didn't give him that deal. And that's fine. But I just felt like the way some of these comments were coming across, people took that podcast into thinking that I think the Braves should have given Dansby $177 million. I have said from day one, it was a huge overpay. It's a bad just deal altogether. And that was not the point that I was trying to make. And again, I said on the podcast, I said on that podcast, it was an overpay. And I'm glad that the Braves didn't make that deal. So here are the 2 points. If you missed it, maybe you just read the headline. Maybe you didn't make it that far into the podcast. Maybe you did, and maybe I didn't explain it very well. Here's the 2 points I was trying to make with the podcast on Monday on Dansby. I think the Braves could have made more of an effort to make Dansby feel valued. And that was kind of my point, in that in hindsight, you didn't know the alternatives. A deal should have been done before the 2022 season. It should have been done. Freddie Freeman shouldn't have gotten a free agency. Dansby shouldn't have gone to free agency because you knew you didn't have great alternatives. And it probably would have been cheaper for that 2022 breakout season that we all knew was an outlier. It was a great contract year season. And I think the Cubs paid for that. But you get something done before that season. I think, again, in hindsight, and even then, and I again, go back and this is all stuff you can find. I thought the Braves should have got something done before that season because you had no other alternatives. And we don't have the benefit of having the full knowledge of the back and forth and what the Braves, actual offers were before the season. We have the report from Mark Bowman is all we really have publicly. And he said that the Braves never upped their offer, their offer from that summer of, I believe it was 6 years, $100 million. I know it was $100 million. I don't remember the years on it. That's all we know publicly. And I just question that, had the Braves given in a little bit and showed Dansby, hey, we do value you, we do want you here, would we give a little bit more? Would you stay? Because I think it just got to the point where the Braves said $100 million in the summer of 2022, never budged off of that. And at some point, my feelings will be hurt as much as, and I had some people say Dansby didn't want to be here. He wanted to be with his wife in Chicago. They wanted to different city. I don't buy that. I very much believe Dansby wanted to be here. He wouldn't have been as active calling the Braves, trying to make something happen if he didn't. I just wonder, had the Braves budged a little bit, shown that they valued and appreciated him, I don't know that I would have gone as high as 120, but had they done that, would Dansby have stayed? Just because, at least the Braves did up a little bit and show that they really valued him, wanted to fight some for him, instead of just saying, no, we said 100 million in the summer, that's what we're doing. That was kind of one of my points there, is that I just feel like if the Braves would have played ball a little bit, maybe you think 100 million was your max too, and you wouldn't have gone beyond that. And that's fine. Like I said, 120 was probably the highest that I would have gone. That was kind of one of my point. The main point that I was really trying to make in that episode is that there was no backup plan. My biggest gripe with the whole decision and not budging at all to try to go get Dansby Swanson, and now you've had 3 years of futility at the position, is you had no backup plan. You had nothing internally. Your backup plan was Orlando Arcia and Vaughn Grissom. You had no backup plan. You had a hope and a dream, and it looked great for 3 months of 2023 when Orlando Arcia was playing out of his mind. But that's my biggest gripe with the Dansby Swanson decision. Okay, you didn't want to budge on your number at all. You didn't want to at least try a little bit. Again, I'm not saying they should have given him 177 million, but from what we know publicly, they didn't move at all from the summer at 100 million. And you're going to stick, your line in the sand right there, not move, which we know AA stubbornly has done. He lost Freddie Freeman in part because of that. Other factors, I get it. But you're going to draw your line in the sand there and not have a backup plan. At least for Freddie Freeman, he had a backup plan. But with Dansby, you had no backup plan. And now that position has been a black hole for 3 years. So again, just from some of the comments, I feel like a lot of people didn't really understand what my main gripe was with the Dansby Swanson situation. I wouldn't have paid him 177 million. I'm glad the Braves didn't give him 177 million, but you had no backup plan. You had no alternative. And now here we are 4 off seasons later, and we are really hoping that Ha-Seong Kim, who I just said is a middling shortstop, similar to Dansby Swanson, you're hoping that he either picks up a $60 million player option, or you can somehow get him in free agency for money that AAV-wise might be similar to what Dansby Swanson got. So that was my main point in that. Apologize if I didn't really express that too much. Never did I say that I think the Braves should have paid him 170 million. Never have I thought that. But that was my biggest gripe, was, okay, you weren't willing to go that far. I get it, but what were you going to do? Because you needed to do something, whether if it wasn't going to be free agency, a trade that you could have made over the last 3 years. And again, don't know what conversations were had. We don't have the benefit of that, but you had nothing. You had no backup plan for Dansby Swanson. That was my biggest gripe in that. Video Moon says, I thought Arcia, the backup plan, we got our money's worth for $6 million for 3 years. Yeah, I don't agree with that video. I don't. I really don't agree with that. Maybe they thought Arcia was the plan. And like I said, for the first half of 2023, looked like geniuses, but I don't really think that was a valid backup plan. You were hoping that a guy who got moved off of shortstop in Milwaukee, who essentially got relegated to the bench, who was in AAA for a while with the Braves, that was going to be your shortstop, that suddenly you fixed him to the point where he's an everyday shortstop again. I think that was very wishful thinking. Maspu says, hard to claim they didn't have a backup plan with Grissom and Nacho in the system. At that point, they pretty much knew Vaughn wasn't going to be able to handle shortstop. So I don't buy that, especially when you went into spring training that year. He outplayed Arcia, and you still put Arcia at shortstop. So I don't buy that Vaughn was a viable backup. And I know they kept Nacho at shortstop for a while, but I think many of us knew he wasn't going to stick at shortstop. So I don't buy that either, that it was Vaughn and Nacho that were going to be viable shortstop options. And it's a team that's wanting to contend and win now. You didn't need guys that maybe could play shortstop defensively at the big league, at the big leagues one day. You needed guys that you knew could play shortstop at the big leagues right now. And you didn't do that. So that was my biggest gripe with it. Again, if you disagree with that part of it, that's fine. I just had many comments of people disagreeing with something that I didn't say. And so I wanted to address that real quick. But appreciate the conversations and the comments on it. A lot of fun back and forth there. Just postseason update real quick. The Blue Jays up 2-0 on the Yankees, just absolutely obliterating them. That Vlad Jr. grand slam and bat flip was really fun. The Tigers and M's have had a real close series. They're tied at 1. Dodgers up 2-0 on the Phillies. Phillies tried to make a comeback in the 9th inning on what is today, Monday. But Freddie Freeman with the scoop at first base to save the game and end that one. And the Brewers-Cubs game going on right now. Both teams hitting 3-run home runs in the first inning. William Contreras, Wild Bill, as I'm recording right now, put the Brewers up by a 4-3 score. But been a pretty fun postseason. Like I said, I'm having to add 2 more subscriptions just so I can watch it. I'm watching the TBS games in Spanish right now because it was either that or pay $20 a month for HBO Max, and I didn't want to do that. This was only like $6. So it's hard trying to get some of these postseason games in right now and stay under budget, which you can do with Monarch Money. There's your last ad there for the day. Thank you so much for joining me here on today's episode of Locked On Braves. Matt, I do agree with you on that, Mass. I do think Arcia was just a bridge, but a bridge to what? And maybe you think it was Nacho and Vaughn. I don't. But I do think Arcia was a bridge, but it's a bridge that still doesn't have an ending to this point. But thank you all for joining me on today's episode. Make sure that you subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.